"Congratulations on your promotion, Ellie. You've earned it," my cousin Marcus said, raising his glass with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I was sitting at my Aunt Victoria's elegant dining room in her Boston home where we'd gathered for our annual family reunion. The inheritance papers in front of me had a strange feeling about them, like something wasn't quite right. My name is Eleanor James, and at 32, I never imagined I'd be questioning whether my own family was trying to steal my inheritance. But after months of strange accounting errors and missing documents, I had learned to be cautious, especially around Aunt Victoria. She had a way of making things disappear that were rightfully mine, always with that same innocent smile Marcus was wearing now. "Thank you," I replied, forcing a smile while my mind raced. The legal documents spread across the table were unlike any I'd seen before. The handwriting on Grandma Rose's amendment to her will looked off. It reminded me of the time last month when I'd found paperwork showing my signature on property transfers I'd never approved. The lawyers couldn't explain it, and Victoria had insisted everything was properly filed and legal. Victoria watched me intently from across the table, absently stirring her untouched tea. "Your grandmother would be so proud of how you're handling the estate," she said with a smirk. "She always did have a special place in her heart just for you." The way she emphasized "just for you" sent chills down my spine. I had noticed Marcus spending more time at Victoria's house lately, claiming they were planning a surprise for the family reunion. But something felt off. The whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms, the strange emails I'd glimpsed on his phone, and now these documents with their peculiar signatures. I lifted the papers, pretending to review them while studying their expressions. Victoria and Marcus exchanged a quick glance that confirmed my suspicions. Making a show of checking my phone, I stood up abruptly. "Oh, would you look at that? I need to make a quick call about Grandma's safety deposit box. Victoria, would you mind if I use your study?" As I walked past Victoria's place setting, I deliberately stumbled, quickly switching the estate documents in the confusion of steadying myself. "I'm so sorry," I exclaimed, straightening up. "I'm such a klutz sometimes." Victoria waved off my apology with a tight smile. "Just try not to mess up anything in the study." I nodded and hurried away, my heart pounding. Through the study doorway, I could still see them at the table. Now I just had to wait and watch. From the study doorway, I watched Victoria lift the papers to examine them, and my stomach clenched with anxiety. Part of me wanted to stop her, to warn her, but I needed to know the truth. I'd spent too many nights reviewing missing funds, too many hours questioning my sanity when documents disappeared, always after sharing them with them. It wasn't always like this. When my grandmother Rose first told me she was making me the executor of her estate 3 years ago, Victoria had seemed supportive, even offering to help with the paperwork and legal matters. But looking back, I should have noticed the red flags, the way important documents would go missing after she reviewed them, how financial statements always seemed to have discrepancies when she helped with accounting. The incident started small, a missing signature page here, an incorrect bank transfer there. Victoria always had an excuse ready. "The bank must have made a mistake," or "you must have misplaced it." But the pattern was becoming clear. The worst was 2 months ago when I discovered nearly $50,000 missing from Grandma's main account. Victoria convinced everyone it must have been a banking error, and Marcus, an accountant, backed her story. But I had copies I'd hidden away because I was starting to suspect something wasn't right. I gripped the doorframe, watching as Victoria reviewed the papers I'd switched. Marcus was typing on his phone, seemingly unconcerned. My own untouched documents sat on the table where I'd left them, the forged signature still visible on the page. A slight tremor in Victoria's hand caught my attention. She set down the papers, her face suddenly pale. "Marcus," she said, her voice shaking. "Something's wrong." Marcus looked up, his expression changing from confusion to horror as he realized which documents she was reading. He jumped up, knocking over his chair. "Victoria, what's happening?" Victoria's hands were trembling violently now. I feel... She tried to stand but stumbled, grabbing the edge of the table for support. "Marcus, what did you do with those papers?" I stepped out of the study, my phone already recording. Marcus was beside Victoria now, his face ashen. "Those weren't supposed to be the ones we showed her," he whispered. But in the silence of the dining room, his words carried clearly. Victoria's eyes widened with realization and fear. "Call a lawyer," she gasped, sinking back into her chair. "Please." I dialed my attorney immediately, my hands steady despite the chaos unfolding before me. Victoria was staring at the documents, panic written across her face as she realized their plan had backfired spectacularly. "Richard?" "Yes, it's Eleanor James. I need you to come to 1542 Beacon Hill Avenue immediately," I said clearly, keeping my phone recording with my other hand. "My aunt and cousin appear to have been forging documents related to my grandmother's estate. I have evidence here and witnesses." As I spoke to the attorney, Victoria's eyes locked onto mine, the usual cold calculation in her gaze replaced by raw fear. "Eleanor," she gasped, "you switched. You knew." "Mr. Barnes is on his way," my attorney assured me. "Please secure any evidence and don't let anyone leave." Marcus was growing more frantic by the second. "Victoria, what's happening? That wasn't supposed to... it wasn't meant for... Shut up, Marcus." Victoria snapped through gritted teeth, her anger momentarily overcoming her distress. "This is all your fault. You said the forgeries would just look like accounting errors. You promised it wouldn't be traced." My blood ran cold. The missing $50,000 from the account, the same account that would have funded my nonprofit youth center, the project I'd been working on for years in Grandma's honor. Everything started clicking into place. "The missing deed transfer last month," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "and the vanishing trust documents 2 months ago. Those weren't accidents, were they?" Victoria's face contorted with another wave of panic. "The deed? That was supposed to keep you from accessing the beach property until we could transfer it," Marcus said. "He said we just needed to delay you from claiming your inheritance, make you think you were confused about what Rose had promised." The sound of a car pulling up outside filled the air. Marcus stood up, backing away from both of us. "Victoria, stop talking. You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying," Victoria spat, her words slurring slightly. "We've been planning this for months, ever since Rose changed her will to leave everything to Eleanor instead of dividing it equally. You were supposed to make sure she signed the new documents today." My attorney burst through the front door, and I quickly stepped aside to let him in. As Richard entered with his paralegal, I stopped recording and sent the video to my private email, then to my lawyer's office. Marcus stood frozen, watching as his carefully constructed plan crumbled around him. "I'll need to review all the documents, immediately," I told Richard, my voice firm. "After all, I need to make sure my grandmother's wishes are properly honored." I met Marcus's terrified gaze. "And I'm sure the court will be very interested in knowing exactly what was in those forged papers." The conference room at Boston Legal Partners was a flurry of activity as lawyers rushed to review the evidence. I sat at the table, my phone clutched in my hand, replaying the recording of Victoria's confession, the tremor in her voice, the panic in her eyes. It was all the evidence I needed to prove this wasn't just paranoia on my part. "Family of Rose." "James?" a paralegal called out. I stood up, noting Marcus's and Victoria's conspicuous absence. They'd been asked to wait in separate rooms while the evidence was examined. "I'm her granddaughter," I said, following the paralegal through the double doors. "How bad is it?" "We've found concerning levels of forgery in multiple documents." The paralegal's expression was grave. Mr. Harrington would like to speak with you about some unusual findings in the will amendments. Mr. Harrington, a tall man with graying hair and sharp eyes, was waiting in his office with several folders spread open. Ms. James, could you tell me exactly when you first suspected your family members were altering documents? I took a deep breath, pulling out my phone. I think you should listen to this first. I played the recording from the family reunion, watching the attorney's expression change from professional concern to alarm. This is very serious, he said, making notes on his tablet. These aren't simple mistakes or misunderstandings. We're looking at deliberate fraud and inheritance theft. Just then, Marcus appeared at the end of the hallway, his face pale and sweaty. He'd clearly overheard the lawyer's words. Eleanor, he started, taking a step toward me. Let me explain. Stay back, Mr. Harrington warned, pressing the intercom button. Security to room 412, please. Marcus raised his hands in surrender. This is all a misunderstanding. Victoria was confused. She didn't know what she was saying. Really? I pulled up the texts I'd discovered on his phone last week, the ones I'd secretly forwarded to myself. So these messages between you and Victoria about making sure she's out of the picture before the property transfers were just friendly conversation? His face drained of color. You went through my phone? After I found the forged documents in your desk drawer? Yes, I did. I turned to Mr. Harrington. I've been reporting discrepancies in my grandmother's estate for 6 months, with unexplained document changes. I'd like to know if they match what you found in these papers today. The lawyer's eyes narrowed. We'll need to run a full forensic accounting analysis. Security will make sure your family members remain available for questioning. To security. Guards appeared, positioning themselves near the conference room where Victoria waited. Marcus looked trapped, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. Victoria and I, he stammered, we were just trying to help the family. The inheritance should have been split equally. It's not fair that you got everything just because you were her favorite by committing fraud. My voice was steady even, as my hands shook with rage. How long have you been doing this? Was it you who altered the trust documents at Christmas too? Marcus's silence was all the answer I needed. Beyond him, I could see Victoria through the glass wall of the conference room where she sat. Her earlier bravado gone, replaced by the fear of someone who knew their schemes had finally caught up with them. The police detective is on his way, Mr. Harrington said quietly. He'll want to take statements from everyone involved. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of calm. The truth was finally coming out, and there was no going back. Detective Peterson arrived within the hour, his presence commanding attention in the sterile legal office corridor. He was a seasoned investigator who specialized in financial crimes, and he listened intently as I played the recording and showed him the text messages. Ms. James, he said, reviewing his notes, you mentioned previous document discrepancies. Can you tell me more about those incidents? I pulled out my phone again, opening a document I'd been quietly maintaining for months. The first time was in February after my grandmother's passing. The property deed had signatures that didn't match her handwriting. The second was in April, the trust document incident. And then in June, the missing funds from the main estate account. My voice remained steady as I continued. Each time the changes were similar but just different enough that the lawyers couldn't immediately pinpoint a cause. The detective's eyes narrowed as he looked at my detailed log of dates, documents, and circumstances. And you've been keeping records ever since you noticed the pattern? I hesitated before pulling out another phone from my purse. I also started carrying a backup phone with a different number. I used it to record conversations when I was around them. I have several where Victoria and Marcus discuss their plans, though they're careful not to be explicit. In one of the recordings, Victoria's voice came through clearly. The beach property is worth millions, Marcus. We can't let her ruin everything we've worked for. Just stick to the plan. A few document changes should be enough. Marcus's response was equally damning. I've got something stronger this time. She won't make it to the property transfer meeting, Detective. Peterson's expression hardened as he listened. Through the window of the conference room, I could see my aunt was now hunched over, looking significantly less confident than she had at the family reunion. The forensic team is already examining the documents, the detective informed me. Our document specialist has already identified several forged signatures that don't match your grandmother's handwriting. We'll need samples from your home as well. A commotion down the hall caught our attention. Victoria was arguing with the security guards, her voice rising in desperation. "I need to speak with my niece," she shouted. "Eleanor, please, you don't understand. We were trying to protect the family legacy." Detective Peterson stepped between us. "Ms. Victoria James, you're not helping your case. We've already found evidence of premeditated fraud." "Premeditated?" Victoria laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the corridor. "We were just trying to correct Rose's mistake. She was senile when she made that will. Eleanor was manipulating her, taking all the family money for her ridiculous charity projects. By forging documents?" Detective Peterson's voice was sharp. "That's not protection, Ms. James. That's criminal fraud." The color drained from Victoria's face. "Fraud? No, that's not... We never meant to..." "Then what exactly did you mean to do?" I asked, my voice surprisingly calm. "When you altered those documents this morning, what was supposed to happen?" Victoria's silence spoke volumes. Behind her, I could see Marcus watching through the conference room window, his face a mask of fear and calculation. I wondered if he was trying to figure out how to spin this, how to explain away months of systematic document forgery as some sort of misguided attempt at family equity. "We'll need both their phones and computers," Detective Peterson told the bunch security guards. "And I want officers posted at both doors. Nobody leaves until we get the forensic results." Mr. Harrington entered the room with a tablet in hand, his expression grim as he reviewed the preliminary analysis. The document examination shows definitive evidence of forgery on several key estate papers, Mr. Harrington announced, his voice clinical. "Most concerning is the attempted amendment to the will that would have redirected approximately 80% of the estate away from the appointed heir." Victoria's face paled. "That's impossible. Marcus said it was just a minor adjustment to correct an oversight." "Minor adjustment?" Detective Peterson interrupted, taking out his notebook. "Like the ones Ms. James experienced over the past 6 months?" The door opened, and another detective entered holding an evidence bag. "We found these in Mr. James's home office," he reported, presenting several practice sheets with attempts at copying signatures, along with detailed notes about document, filing dates, and probate procedures. I felt my knees weaken as I realized the full scope of their plan. "You were documenting everything like some kind of experiment." "It wasn't like that," Victoria protested, but her voice wavered. "We just needed to track what worked. The first few attempts were caught by the banks, so we had to be more careful." "So, you escalated your efforts," Detective Peterson concluded, examining the practice sheets. "Did you know these forged documents could have resulted in millions of dollars being illegally diverted?" The room fell silent. Marcus, still visible through the window, sank into a chair in the hallway, his head in his hands. "The youth center," I said slowly, pieces clicking into place. "It wasn't just about the inheritance, was it? You needed to stop the property transfer because Grandma specifically designated it for the community center project." Victoria's face contorted with a mixture of anger and fear. "You were ruining everything. That beachfront property has been in our family for generations, and you were going to turn it into some charity case. Marcus said he could fix it. By stealing my inheritance?" The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. "We weren't trying to..." Victoria started, but Mr. Harrington cut her off. "The forgery on these documents," the lawyer stated, looking directly at Victoria, was sophisticated enough to indicate professional assistance. "The notary stamps are also fraudulent." Detective Peterson turned to the other officer. "We'll need a full warrant for both their homes and offices, and contact the bank manager listed on these documents. find out if they were complicit or victims of fraud themselves. Victoria slumped back in her chair, the fight draining from her face. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," she whispered. "Marcus kept saying we just needed one more try." I stepped closer to her, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. Every document that went missing, every signature that was forged, every transfer that was delayed, you were both there, watching, taking notes on how your fraud was affecting me and my grandmother's wishes. What kind of people does that make? You? The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, I could hear Marcus being read his rights as additional officers arrived. Victoria stared at her hands, unable to meet my gaze. "Detective," I said, turning away from my aunt. "I'm ready to make my formal statement now." The trial lasted 3 weeks, but it felt like years. I sat in the courtroom each day, watching as the prosecution methodically laid out their case against Victoria and Marcus. The evidence was overwhelming. The practice signature sheets from Marcus's office, their detailed notes on each forged document, the recorded conversations and text messages discussing their plans. What struck me most was their demeanor throughout the proceedings. Victoria, usually so polished and confident, looked small in her defendant's chair. Marcus couldn't even look at me, keeping his eyes fixed on the floor as expert witnesses detailed the potentially devastating financial impact their forgeries could have caused. Mr. Harrington's testimony was particularly damning. He presented a comprehensive analysis showing how they had gradually escalated their forgery attempts over time, demonstrating clear intent to divert the estate assets. The bank representative confirmed that Marcus had attempted to use his position as an accountant to manipulate financial records through his professional connections. The defendants showed a calculated pattern of behavior, the prosecutor argued in her closing statement. This wasn't just a family disagreement over inheritance. It was a systematic attempt to defraud Ms. James of her rightful inheritance, with a clear escalation that could have resulted in the loss of millions. When the verdict was finally read, I felt no joy, only relief. Both Victoria and Marcus were found guilty on multiple counts of fraud, attempted theft, and conspiracy. The judge's words echoed through the silent courtroom. The premeditated nature of these actions, carried out against a family member over an extended period, demands significant consequences. I watched as they were led away, thinking about how greed and entitlement had twisted two people I once trusted into something unrecognizable. Their reputations, their freedom, all sacrificed in an attempt to steal what my grandmother had intended for me and the community. 1 year after the trial, I stood at the podium of the grand opening ceremony for the Rose James Community Youth Center, preparing to cut the ribbon. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was exactly the project Victoria and Marcus had tried to prevent. The beachfront property, which they had been so desperate to steal, had been transformed into a vibrant center serving hundreds of underprivileged youth with educational programs, arts facilities, and career training. The Henderson Foundation, which had partnered with me on the project, had helped expand it beyond even my grandmother's original vision. Success isn't just about wealth or property, I began, looking out at the sea of faces gathered for the opening. It's about honoring promises and building something meaningful that extends beyond ourselves. I paused, letting my words sink in. Sometimes the biggest threats to our dreams come from those closest to us, but surviving those challenges makes our achievements even more meaningful. After my speech, several young program participants approached me, their eyes bright with excitement about the opportunities the center would provide. One teenage girl, her voice filled with determination, asked how I'd maintained my focus throughout the difficulties. I focused on what really mattered, I told her. I gathered evidence, trusted my instincts, and refused to let fear stop me from honoring my grandmother's wishes. Later that evening, I received an email from the Henderson Foundation confirming they were doubling their support for the center's programming for another 5 years. I smiled, thinking about how differently things might have turned out if I hadn't trusted my instincts that day at the family reunion. the local paper had run. A small article that morning about Victoria and Marcus beginning their sentences. I didn't read it. Instead, I focused on the applications from the first group of scholarship recipients for the center's summer program, knowing that the best revenge wasn't about getting even, it was about moving forward and succeeding despite those who tried to hold you back. As I placed my grandmother's photograph on the wall of the center's main hall, I felt her presence. "We did it, Grandma," I whispered. Her final gift wasn't just the inheritance. It was the strength to fight for what was right, even when it meant standing against family. That was a legacy worth protecting.